Mr. Dowd, I turn to you first. Donald Trump very clearly wants this field all to himself, and Nikki Haley won't let him have it. Why not? She's obviously not doing very well in the polls. We can't find a state where she's going to beat him. What is her strategy?
Well, I honestly believe she's a smart woman, that she understands she can't win this race. I mean, you just look at it, matter of fact, every single state that she's running and about to be in South Carolina, she's losing among Republican voters by 40 to 50 points in this race. She lost Republicans by 50 points in New Hampshire. And so I think she understands that. My guess is, and I haven't had any conversation with her, but my guess is she has something to say, and she wants to say it in a clear way. And she thinks that by staying in, she has a platform to say that. But I believe that in her heart, she knows she can't win this race. So she's in it to deliver a message about Donald Trump and what it means to the country and the Republican Party. And by those standards, it's probably a good thing.
Vaughn, her staying in the race, how does that impact Trump's strategy?
Well, right now, it keeps the Trump campaign from being able to partner with the RNC. And you see the Democrats and their allies having record fundraising. Mm-hmm. And right now, that is keeping Donald Trump from being able to work with the actual Republican Party apparatus to build a joint fundraising committee, which is putting them in the deficit here to start off 2024. It is so hard, if I could, though, to listen to Nikki Haley's comments this afternoon, because it takes me back to May 3rd of 2016, Stephanie. It was in Evansville, Indiana, when I was with Ted Cruz in the back of a barbecue shop. And it was the morning that he dropped out of the presidential race. And that is where he called Donald Trump a serial philanderer. He called him a pathological liar. He said he was amoral. In that morning, I looked at a couple of the other reporters that were in that barbecue shop with me. We're like, where the hell was that the last year? It came down in literally the 11th hour. A couple hours later, he dropped out of the race. And so to hear this from Nikki Haley, she has now been campaigning for president of the United States for more than a year. And to hear those words, for Donald Trump, his spokesman said, she's going to go right around and kiss his butt, ultimately. That was their prediction. And so far, the last 8 years, Republicans time and again have proved that that's usually typically what they do.
Matthew, could she be pulling kind of the original Ron DeSantis strategy? Raise enough money, stay in the race long enough that if Trump's legal troubles actually end up being devastating for him, she'll be waiting in the wings. That's what DeSantis wanted to do. He just couldn't raise the money. She's a money-raising machine.
Well, she is doing I guess we'll call it the original DeSantis strategy, whatever that strategy happened to be, which was raise a ton of money, spend a ton of money, and go nowhere and drop out before you even get to the first few big states in this matter. That seemed to be what the Ron DeSantis strategy was as it unfolded. She has spent a large amount of money. She has to believe she can't win. She is, as Vaughn was saying, she is raising her criticism of Donald Trump. But I will remind folks that whatever level of criticism they have, I would not be shocked at all if the day after she announces she's no longer running, she endorses Donald Trump. That's what's amazing about the Republicans today. And Vaughn quoting Ted Cruz, who said exactly what Vaughn said in the course of this, and then within weeks endorsed Donald Trump, and now walks around talking about how great Donald Trump is in the course of this. And so I don't think they have a strategy. They don't have a strategy because they still think of the Republican Party that no longer exists. The party they think that Nikki Haley is running in today is a party that disappeared 5, 7, 8 years ago. It doesn't exist anymore. And Donald Trump, in my view, understands the current Republican Party better than anybody else in the Republican that holds office today. He understood it better in 2016. He understands it better today. All these other Republicans don't seem to understand what the Republican Party has become.
Vaughn.
Matthew's not wrong. And this is the part that we also need to understand. Compared to 8 years ago, Stephanie, you and I were talking here. This is a different Trump campaign. This is a different operation.
8 years ago, that Trump campaign was a ragtag group of people that he was pulling in willy-nilly. It was a mess. Compare that campaign squad to his current team, who thinks he's going to have this nomination wrapped up in weeks.
Right. The folks were bowing down to what was essentially just Donald Trump as an individual at that point. This is now a movement that they essentially have to bow down to.
And the people bowing down were a bunch of randos back then.
Exactly. And this time around, there's two co-campaign managers. Their names are Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita. They are longtime Republican operatives. They are respected across the Republican Party. And what they are doing this go around is we have become accustomed to the last 9 years of infighting within the Trump campaign and the White House. They are not tolerating that. But how are they doing that? They are not alienating anybody from Donald Trump. They are not trying to keep Steve Bannon or Michael Flynn away from Donald Trump. Everybody can call up Donald Trump if they like. Everybody can go to Mar-a-Lago if they like. Everybody has access to them. But they have also made it very clear, saying, look, we have given Donald Trump a formidable political operation that by as soon as March 19th, we could hit the number of delegates to become the presumptive nominee. So Nikki Haley says that she wants to take this as long as people are voting, but they may hit the delegate threshold as soon as literally March 19th. And that is by and large due to the fact that they have built up an operation that not only in Iowa, New Hampshire, and now in South Carolina knew exactly what their voter databases looked like, had reached out to these folks and were able to tell us, we know we're going to win because we already have 60% of the support in these states because we know the individuals, and they've told us repeatedly that they're going to come and vote for us.
Okay, that's where Donald Trump thinks he's going to win. Tristan, new topic. Let's talk about where Donald Trump has definitively lost. And that is Donald Trump's huge civil fraud judgment. Tish James, the New York AG, made it clear, we showed a soundbite earlier, if he does not pay, she will act. What does that mean? What does that look like? What levers can she pull?
The same levers that you can pull anytime you have a civil judgment. You can go and enforce it through the courts and actually go get liens on assets. You can go get garnishing of wages or
Would
other
that
income.
actually work on Donald Trump, though? Are there loopholes he can get through? Because he's quite good at that.
He is quite good at that, but there's a funny thing about real estate. It doesn't tend to move a whole lot. Like, he can try to move the corporate entities around, but he can't just, we can't David Blaine Trump Tower into the air.
No,
and
but he can quickly
away.
put it under a different LLC, put it under Ivanka.
He's already forbidden from doing that. So that's the key, is that they already thought a couple steps ahead here. They already have a bunch of mechanisms in place to say you can't go recreate LLCs or corporations in other states. There's a monitor in place that's going to remain in place as long as this judgment doesn't get appealed and overturned.
This is the monitor that he and Tish James agreed upon,
Barbara,
and now he doesn't
yes,
like her.
That's correct. Yes, because she was enforcing rules, and he doesn't like those. So all of a sudden she's bad.
Let's talk about the hush money case, because this case people love to dump on. They think it's a stretch. They think it's political. But Barb McQuade had a piece in the New York Times where she said this case is about making covert payments to avoid losing an election and then further concealing it.
That's
okay?
right. It's not a hush money case. It's an election interference case.
Do people realize that?
I don't think that they do. We need to start calling it the election interference case, except that gets it confused with the two other election interference cases. So maybe we need to call it the 2016 election interference case as opposed to the 2020 election overthrow cases. I don't know what we need to do, but at the end of the day, it is falsification of business records in the service of another crime, and that other crime was campaign finance violations, or were campaign finance violations, 36 counts of it. So that's what we're really talking about here. It's not doing hush money by itself is not illegal. In fact, that's really Donald Trump's defense is basically, yes, I am a jerk and I had to pay hush money to pay off one of my mistresses, and I did it so my wife wouldn't find out. It had nothing to do with the fact that I was trying to win the presidency.
You know what's so
That's
twisted?
basically his defense.
The most twisted thing, you said that's Donald Trump's defense. I thought you were going to say that's Donald Trump's forte, because it actually is. Natasha, President Biden has so many accomplishments to run on. Is it safe to say he is going to be showcasing them, ticking them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the board at the State of the Union?
Absolutely. This is his chance right now. I mean, his campaign advisors and White House advisors have been telegraphing for months that this State of the Union address was going to really be his moment. And, we saw, if you recall, the Super Bowl, he passed up an opportunity to sit down and have an interview and speak to millions of people. Now, a lot of people around him are saying they want more control over the environment. This will give Biden greater control. He'll be able to read his speech, of course. There's things that come up during the State of the Union last year. There was heckling. So that, of course, he'd have to contend with that. But this is a much more scripted and controlled environment. And you're absolutely right. He's going to take off one by one all of his accomplishments. And Democrats think that this is the chance to really showcase this in front of the country. Everything from getting the climate agenda through student loans, you could go on and on, infrastructure and so on. But you can also, see him going after Republicans a little bit. I think we might see them spice it up.
Juanita, the president had a very strong State of the Union last year. Even if he has an amazing one this year, look at the general public. Our attention is so scattered. Fewer and fewer people sit down, families, and watch the State of the Union address like they did years ago. How much can one speech truly make a difference in 2024?
Well, Stephanie, I think that's where the clips and the moments that go viral matter. Of course, Republicans have no sense of respect or decorum, so they're going to heckle President Biden like they did last year. But it's a question of whether or not Biden can deliver that retort that really blows the nation away like it did last year. Of course, the context is a bit different with the recent fights on border and foreign aid funding. But also we have the ongoing crisis in Gaza with 28,500 people killed in Gaza. And so I think the president is going to have to balance out this speech where, of course, respond to the hecklers, get your viral moment, celebrate what you've accomplished, but also set a vision for 2024 and beyond. That is still a lot to try to undertake in 45 minutes. And so I think that the Biden campaign team is going to have to settle for maybe 2 out of 3 and then call it a night and try to amplify whatever major clips do emerge.
Juanita, let's talk about this campaign war chest. Obviously, it is great for Biden's team that they have so much money. But think about where we are. Think about with social media, with misinformation, with news deserts, and so many low-cost ways to get in front of voters. Does a big war chest matter as much today as it did, let's say, 10, 20 years ago?
I'll say for 2 reasons it matters. One, because we know the RNC is sinking millions of dollars into Trump's legal fees. So we know that Republicans are at a disadvantage. But it also helps the Biden team because we know they can invest those resources in on the ground, direct face-to-face interactions with voters. Yes, I know they're planning a massive digital play, but nothing does the organizing work and the power of individuals going door to door, talking to voters directly. That's where you persuade voters. That's where you mobilize communities, and that's where you increase turnout. Again, the digital play here is going to be big for Democrats too, but there's nothing that can ever undermine or compare with the organizing power of face-to-face interactions with voters, and I hope the campaign is investing in that heavily.
Natasha, new topic. The New York Times reported that Donald Trump now favors a national ban on abortion after 16 weeks. His campaign is denying the report. If you're the Biden campaign and you see this headline, how are you responding to Trump?
Oh, Democrats couldn't trumpet this quickly enough. I mean, they mobilized around the report immediately. They held a campaign call. Joe Biden released a very lengthy statement on it. This was a really surprising move from Donald Trump and the campaign to be talking about this. Now, NBC News had heard from sources that Donald Trump was settling on a 16-week abortion, just a marker that he was going to say that that was what he was comfortable with, but not propose an abortion ban. That, of course, a federal ban, that has implications up and down the ballot for a lot of these Senate races that are on the line. And it immediately energized Democrats. We saw all these advocates, abortion rights advocates, get together around that. And quickly after that, you saw some scrambling from the Trump campaign. They released a statement saying it was fake news and so forth. But it's really going to be something that is difficult for them in messaging right now because that headline is out there already and the wheels are turning on that messaging.
Here's the thing about messaging. Just tell the people what you plan to do. Juanita, let's take it a step further, because I want to talk about the decision from the Alabama Supreme Court that frozen embryos should now be considered children. This could put IVF treatment in peril across the state. There's already reports that fertility clinics in Alabama might have to close their doors. Just how out of touch is this with this decision with where the American people are?
Steph, I remember when that draft decision to overturn Roe leaked in May of 2022. I remember sitting there and I remember going on air talking about how this is just the beginning. This is going to extend to other forms of reproductive rights. This is going to extend to privacy. This is going to extend to, let's be real, any precedent that exists within the Supreme Court. And here we have this explicit example. What my biggest concern is that this type of ruling out of Alabama is going to expedite the anti-abortion agenda that we've been seeing rolling around across the country, because this is one of those test cases that absolutely is going to have impacts in other parts of the country. And what my biggest concern is how this impacts individuals, the people who are seeking access to basic health care, whether that's to start a family or otherwise. But the reality is that this is going to cause harm. And this is yet another example of the impact of overturning Roe that should be laid right at Donald Trump's feet. So just as the way Democrats really jumped on Trump's consideration of a national abortion ban, Democrats absolutely need to tell the story, talk through the impact of what this type of policy and what these type of rulings mean for regular people and voters across the country who we know overwhelmingly support access to reproductive rights.